Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have back on the show our friend Mary Trump, a psychologist, a Democratic activist. She has Mary Trump Media and best-selling author. In fact, her new New York Times best-selling book is Who Could Ever Love You? A Family Memoir. Mary, lots of people love you. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Dean. It's great to be here as always, especially since it's crunch time.
It is. This is the last 2 weeks of residents in America, perhaps, or who knows? Let's see. We got to win this thing. So look, let me ask you a question here because it's been coming up more and more about Donald. That you've seen him forever. You've seen him almost your entire life. Is it when you look at him now? I don't want you to be objective, not to tell me something I want to hear. His cognitive functioning. He's aged, so it's gotten slower. But is it changed dramatically, or is it just a little bit slower? Or like, what are you seeing compared to the Donald you used to know?
I mean, he's the same awful human being, of course, but well, actually, he's worse because of the power that has been bestowed upon him by people who should know better. He's so much worse. And I have to be honest, I do not understand how what happened at that so-called town hall in Pennsylvania wasn't the end of it. It was deeply disturbing and bizarre and just unacceptable. I mean, imagine anybody else doing something like that. It was I looked at it and I watched the whole thing, unfortunately, because I guess I'm a masochist. And it was described as an impromptu concert. It was described as a dance party. And it to me looked like somebody who was decompensating and having who knows, a combination of psychological and cognitive issues happening all at once. And I cannot believe that it's not news anymore. I just like constantly feel like John Oliver. We got him, right? No, apparently not. Apparently not. So
It
your assessment is correct. It's very bad and it's worsening seemingly by the day.
it seems very concerning, and I don't know what it will take for corporate media to have on not me to talk about it, but have mental health professionals, psychologists on to talk about for the American public to understand what they're seeing and also what the future could be. Because if he were to win with the added pressure of being president, how that would expedite the process of whatever we're seeing going on. And that's what I don't get. I don't understand. And we don't have an answer to that. I don't know what's your opinion on it. Why do you think corporate media just won't embrace this issue? They won't talk this issue much.
Well, I think they still want the horse race. And why the Republican Party wants it is very obvious. They want to
Mhm.
drag him across the line, even if he's barely conscious, so they can install the JD Vance, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk triumvirate, which should just strike fear to the heart of everybody. The corporate media seriously seems to they don't want two issues. They want the horse race because it keeps us all engaged and stressed and doom scrolling and clicking the links. And then they also don't want to engage with the very serious issues this country is facing. You and I have been using this word for years now. I have yet to see the New York Times do anything but dance around the word fascist.
Mhm.
They don't want to engage with it. They don't. It's almost as if for the psychological and potential neurological issues that they think it's somehow unseemly. I don't know, but that it would be crossing a line of propriety or something. But I agree with you, and I've said it as well. The legal analysts on MSNBC and other shows had their day, but we're not dealing with legal issues anymore. After every rally, after every public meltdown, there should be a panel of clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, neuropsychologists, neurologists. If you want to put a gerontologist in there in the mix too, fine. A sociologist to kind of give shape to the conversation about what's happening with us collectively, fine. But by not doing that, they're doing a huge disservice to voters.
I agree. I want the experts on. I don't want me going on and going, look, he's got dementia. I'm not a doctor. I can't even
Right.
define dementia accurately. I can just tell you what I think it looks like because of my late mom and what she went through. But I want experts on to discuss it, and they won't. And imagine if Joe Biden stood for 40 minutes at a rally and awkwardly sort of danced for no apparent. I said, let's forget the questions. Enough with the questions. Like Donald said, let's just listen to music. I can't even imagine the explosion in corporate media. They would have had those panels, but Donald does it like, yeah, we're gonna, and they even sanewashed it too. He
Yeah,
chose to have a dance party. Like he didn't
yeah.
choose to have a dance party. He just didn't want to answer questions, and he thought he'd stand there. A normal person leaves the stage after. Let me just leave the stage. We'll let the doctors do the thing. We're gonna pick it up in a few minutes. Everyone just relax, calm down. We'll leave the music on, and let's stand there like this. You
We,
know,
yes, I think to call it dancing is to do a disservice to dancing. But, the other, what he said was, who the hell wants to hear questions? Well, he clearly didn't, but since everybody else was there for a town hall, they probably did. So one, it was just an abdication of his responsibility to provide what he said he was going to provide. But then, yeah, you're right. It became this detached from reality uh sideshow in which he seemed not to know where he was or what he was supposed to be doing. And I don't know. I don't know how anybody can come away from that thinking that everything is just fine. And it was just
yeah.
Donald going off on one of his charming little tangents. So I I don't know anymore what it's going to take
Yeah.
because it's not like that was an isolated incident. It was the worst and the most extended, but you can pick out any paragraph from a town hall or a rally. You could just look at his temperament during serious interviews like the one with Bloomberg. And unfitness is written all over this guy in just about every aspect of what it means to be fit.
I'm waiting for ABC to roll out the new Dancing with the Felons, the new season with Donald Trump. All the felons will be there. I'll have Martha Stewart, like all the people who have been convicted, and they can come on the show. It'll be great. And I think Dancing with the Felons will be great in prison if Donald. What's kind of interesting is next month, literally in a few weeks from now, he's supposed to come back to New York for sentencing for his 34 felonies. Mary, no one talks about his 34 felony convictions like it was 20 years ago. Like, oh, that's so 3 months ago. He's a convicted felon for cheating in a 2016 campaign. And I challenge people to Google a corporate media article where that comes up. I don't know. It's just, we live in a surreal time.
If only he had written about his felonies in an email, it would be so much better. No, I actually made a video like a week ago. It's like just a reminder that Donald is due for sentencing after having been convicted of 34 felonies, and he's out on bail in 3 other jurisdictions, just in case anybody's still interested in stuff like that. But no, instead, we have them dressing him up in a tuxedo and being normalized at that horrible dinner that I can't stand, or whatever it's called. Like, to
Albert Smith,
me,
Al
the
Smith,
Al David, whatever,
Al
it's
Smith,
like
Al Smith. Al
Al
Davis is
Smith.
different. Al Smith, right?
It's sort of the equivalent of the White House Correspondents' Dinner for me. It's just a way to normalize the worst among us, and the fact that like people are happy to sit in a room with a guy who tried to overthrow our government, who's a felon, who's an adjudicated rapist, and is literally engaging in Nazi talking points was nauseating to me, which suggests that Donald Trump is not the only problem.
Right. And on some level, do you think, I mean, Vice President Harris was campaigning someplace else. She did a video, but I wonder if deep down, the optics of it, she's talking about him as a threat, which he is, and
Mhm.
knowing sitting on the same dais with him undermines that and makes him more normal. And I wonder if that factored in. We don't know that for sure, but I wonder if that factored into her thinking, which would be great if it did, because it should.
I hope so. I also wish she would say that if that's the case, because it's true. Like, could you imagine just wanting to be in the same room for a social occasion with Donald Trump? You couldn't pay me enough to be in a room with that man, unless it was to watch him being sent to prison or something. So for Democrats to be engaging in that kind of normalization, like Chuck Schumer needs to be ashamed of himself for being there and sitting next to him and laughing at his stupid, cruel, vicious jokes. These are allegedly religious people, and he was just hateful last night. And everybody was
Mhm.
totally cool with it. So I'm very glad she didn't go. And as you say, I hope it was for the reason of
Interesting.
not wanting to be in the same room with this horrible human being.
And I'm chatting with our friend Mary Trump. So Mary, Donald has now uh, elevated his rhetoric. Fascists usually, and we've talked about them in the past, but I've had experts on, you spoke to them, they usually find like a group within the country, a minority group, to be honest, or an outside threat that's could show up here as the real threat. Now he's made us,
Yeah.
Democrats, as the threat. It was not good when he did it to Muslims and he continues to do it to migrants, but now calling Democrats the biggest problem we have is an enemy from within, some very bad people. Radical left lunatics could be handled by the National Guard or military. Then, when asked on town hall with Harris Faulkner, he doubled down and said, Democrats are sick and they're also evil. And what concerns me is you could dismiss this if there was no January 6th, if there's no history of violence by his supporters. But you have that subset of his supporters who, if they keep hearing we're the enemy and they really believe it, they might do something. And I don't just mean me and you, I mean Democrats
Mhm.
across the nation. I have grave concerns about that.
We should have grave concerns about that. I'm sorry that it takes having half of the country targeted as enemies from within to get people to start paying attention. It should have been enough when he was demonizing Asians during COVID and Muslims from the first day of his administration and Haitian immigrants now. Like that should have been enough, but apparently it also has to be about people's self-interest before they get
Mhm.
engaged. But here we are, and to minimize it by letting him dress up in a tuxedo and go among New York's elite, for example, is to increase the danger because it lulls the other people into a false sense of security while his base continues to be ramped up and agitated and feel under threat. And we saw this, Dean, during COVID. He made it clear that as long as most of the deaths were happening in blue states, it was totally cool. As long as the majority of people who were dying were black and brown, awesome. So he, for a long time now, and I think people forget this, he's been sowing those seeds that Democrats also, as people, are kind of subhuman and not worth worrying about.
it, it's deeply concerning. You know what's interesting? In 2016, he made Muslims one of his main target, and in this campaign, it's been less so. And I surmise is that because Saudi gave Jared Kushner $2 billion, and he got millions for his golf course tournaments there. So it was
Mhm.
all of a sudden from I hate Muslims, $2 billion, good people, best people. That's what we're dealing with. He's transactional in his bigotry. This is
Mhm.
I've never seen this. So if you're a group out there who's demonizing, gather your money and hand it to him. That might be the only way to get him off your back. I've never
Well,
seen this.
yeah, because nobody like him has existed before, and I understand the roots of it, which doesn't make it less horrifying, but everything in my family is transactional. His relationship with his children are transactional. So it is an indication that we all need to be very aware of how easily manipulable he is by people in a position to give him what he wants. And sometimes that's money, and
Mhm.
sometimes that's the illusion of power or strength, which I think is what happens with Putin and Kim Jong-un, who clearly have his number. But sometimes it's devotion, because I'm not kidding. Like if I went to him crawling on my hands and feet, not my hands and yeah, my hands
Hands
and
in, sure.
whatever that
I know what you
expression
mean.
is. I don't
Right.
know. And I subjugated myself and apologized and told him that I've come to my senses and I think he's the greatest thing. He'd be totally cool with that. He might put me in his
Wow.
cabinet. It's like because all that he cares about is the subjugation and the loyalty, as long as it's one way. So that should think about how many people have JD Vance called him Hitler.
Right.
and American fentanyl or heroin. And
Right.
he's the vice presidential nominee now.
What would you want to be in his cabinet? Anything that you have in mind? Is there any?
Uh, oh man. Ambassador to some country that doesn't have extradition is
So you
what I
just leave and just go. So last thing that before we talk about your book for the last few minutes of the election, look, it's this election is so close. It is razor thin. I was just looking. It doesn't help. But here's the thing: it's not like Vice President Harris is down by 3 points in the battleground states and she's got to overcome it. It's neck and neck. So it's whoever wants it more is going to win this. It's really like that. It's like a sports analogy, whatever. What do you think from what you're seeing? What do you think Vice President Harris has to do to win this thing, to close this out?
First, I think it's worth just pausing for a moment to say how insane it is that this is close.
Mhm.
Because it shows us how much work we have to do after, assuming everything goes well after this election, because she should be up by 40 points. I think it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking that we are here. I think she's been doing pretty much what she needs to be doing. I think they should spend every penny they have. They should be getting out the vote. I think she's making the right stops. I think she's done a really good job of deploying people in her camp to stump for her. I think she, if anything, she just needs to double down on making the contrast between him and her, but and by being very clear, as she has been recently, how dangerous he is. Um, and just I think if people see the contrast between who she is and who he is, which is why it's good she went on Fox, that is helpful. And I think for the rest of us, we just need to ignore the polls because they're being flooded with very unscrupulous polling from partisan groups, and there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of churn, and we just need to keep our heads down and do what we always do, run like we're a couple of points behind, but with a mad dash to the end, we will pull this one out.
It's remarkable to see there's article after article. She's not doing as well with like it'll be like Arabs and then young black men and with lefties who like rainy days, like people who don't like Monday. She's not doing well. What is going on compared to 2020? Like any subset of a demographic that Politico or the New York Times can find, she's polling 8% below right-handed people who are colorblind. We don't know what is going on. It's really that crazy. I'm like, you have polled the hell out of this. And well, all right, let's talk the last couple minutes here. The new book, Who Could Ever Love You? A Family Memoir. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's very compelling. I mean, you really open up. It's a family memoir. You as well, opening right from the beginning to your own, what you were going through, the challenges that continue to this day. But also about your family and your late father and your brother, Fritz. I didn't know that was what you called him until I read the book. Why did you want to share so much with everyone? Because that's a tough thing. You're a public figure now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I hit a wall at the end of 2023 and I didn't quite know why. I just was not living my life,
Hmm.
and I was passing up all sorts of opportunities, and I was not getting out in the world, and it's like, everybody else is doing that, and I've been working really hard. Why am I incapable of enjoying the fruits of my labor in any way, shape, or form? So I wanted to do a little digging and also recognize that part of it is because everything's still horrible. Like, we're continuing to be
Right.
traumatized by Donald's presence in our society, and the fact that he still has power, and the fact that this election is close, like that's traumatizing. Um, so I realized in a deeper way than I had before that my earlier traumas growing up in this particular family were very much connected to my sort of inability to take things in stride right now. And I also wanted to share with people what my family, including Donald, had done to my family of origin, including my dad, especially my dad,
Mhm.
and the impact that's had on me throughout my life. Plus, of course, I I hoped anyway that a lot of people would feel validated by my experiences, because I think a lot of us have had the same kinds of the sense of dislocation and isolation for the last certainly 4, if not 8 years, and it's felt really lonely and confusing, and by sharing my experiences, I really did hope that other people would see their own experiences reflected, which, can help people work things through, or at least not feel so alone.
Yeah, I mean, you really like in your first book, but you give us a vivid picture of your dad's father. I don't know how was that. Is he your grandfather? How's that?
Yeah, he's my
He's
grandfather.
grandfather. I'm like, I am not good at this family math stuff, but it's just a horrible person. Then when you were
Yep.
living in that, in the when there was a separation and divorce, and you're living in the building, and he won't even approve things. They like fix windows and stuff. And you're like, what a petty, terrible guy. I wonder. I mean, it might be a hard question, but if your dad was still alive, do you think he'd have an impact on Donald? You think he would have changed him?
No, no, I think Donald has been exactly who he is for not forever, but certainly since he was a kid. And the way my dad was positioned in the family to be the black sheep and the
Mhm.
loser, um, I don't think that would have changed my hope for my dad, who would have been 85 now.
Oh.
Um, so, he too could have been running for president. Uh, he I hope anyway that he would have gotten free. His only chance for survival was getting free of that family, and unfortunately, that did not happen. Which is why he died when he was 42. He would have had no impact on Donald whatsoever, and I don't think that they would have. Again, the best thing for my father would have had no relationship with anybody in his family of origin.
That's remarkable. And the book again, Who Could Ever Love You, a family memoir. And you learn a lot about Mary, about how her parents met, which was kind of remarkable. They met first and then didn't see each other again for a long period of time. And then they getting together. And I think you described them as ridiculously attractive or something. Is that the right
Yes, they
term?
were.
Right, ridiculous. There's a lot of pictures in there. And your own Mary shares everything about her own life, about physical and emotional challenges as well. And it's a very powerful book. So I hope people pick it up. It's a New York Times bestseller. Great read. Mary, thanks so much for making time. I know you're crazed and I know you're swamped. I really appreciate it. We got to win this thing.